Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for adramofOutlander.com. Join me for in-depth discussions of the Outlander book series by Diana Gabaldon, the television series, and anything interesting that falls between. This is podcast episode 146 and week 31 of the Drums of Autumn read-along. This week's episode is entitled Forgiveness, and the summary goes something like this. Claire was sent to the longhouse. She examined Roger. Jamie wanted to keep some facts to themselves. Roger baptized a baby. Young Ian was adopted into the tribe to replace the man Roger had killed. He was named Wolf's brother and joined Works with Her Hands family. With sadness, Roger, Claire, and Jamie left the village toward River Run. Roger learned the baby might not be his. Jamie and Claire left Roger to decide. Stephen Bonnet was arrested. Brianna implored Lord John to arrange a meeting. The mother bear roared. Lord John was injured. Bonnet made a fiery escape and asked Brianna to go with him. Inside the chapters. Chapter 61, The Office of a Priest. An exhausted Claire was taken to the longhouse. The air smelled of smoke and burnt things. There was singing. She wondered if it was for the dead woman. She exclaimed when she saw Jamie and Roger. Roger embraced her. He was thin and stank, but seemed healthy to her. I love how Claire clinically assessed him immediately. This demonstrated how much she cared for him. He asked after Brianna. Claire noticed his injured foot, but Jamie interrupted and asked how Claire was. Oddly, he told her his arm needed to be looked at because it hurt. As Claire points out, he would never say he was in pain in front of Roger. She looked him over and didn't think his arm was broken. "What are you up to?" I muttered, kneeling beside him. I felt the arm gingerly through his shirt. No compound fractures. I rolled it carefully up for a better look. "I have not told him about Brianna," he said very softly, "and I think it's better you do not." I stared at him. "We can't do that. He has to know." "Keep your voice down. Aye, he maybe should know about the bairn, but not the other, not Bonnet." I bit my lip, feeling gingerly down the swell of his biceps. He had one of the worst bruises I had ever seen, a huge mottled splotch of purple-blue, but I was fairly sure the arm wasn't broken. I wasn't so sure about his suggestion. He could see the doubt on my face. He squeezed my hand hard. "Not yet. Not here. Let it wait, at least until we're safe away." I thought for a moment as I ripped the sleeve of his shirt and used it to make a rough sling. Learning that Brianna was pregnant was going to be a shock by itself. Perhaps Jamie was right. There was no telling how Roger would react to the news of the rape, and we were a long way from being home free yet. Better he should have his head clear. At last I nodded, reluctantly. "All right," I said aloud, getting up. "I don't think it's broken, but the sling will help. What do you think of Jamie's idea?" Claire went back to Roger to look at his foot. She blurted out Brianna was pregnant. "Pregnant? My God, but how?" Jamie made a derisive noise in the back of his throat. Roger glanced at him, then quickly away. "That is, I never thought." "How? Aye, you didna think, and it's my daughter left to pay the price of your pleasure." Roger's head snapped around at that, and he glared at Jamie. "She is not left in any way. I told you she is my wife." "She is?" I said, startled in the midst of my unwrapping. "They're handfast," Jamie said very grudgingly. "Why could the lass not have told us, though?" "That's a great question. Claire thought Bree wanted to give Roger an escape plan since she believed the baby was Bonnet's, but moreover, that she believed Jamie wouldn't see it as a marriage without a priest, church, and contract. Claire reassured Roger of Brianna's health and well-being. Brianna had wanted to go with Claire and Jamie to find him. This was of great relief to Roger. Jamie admitted. It was a great misunderstanding. A great misunderstanding. So Brianna hadn't told them to go beat the crap out of Roger and get rid of him. Yeah, a great misunderstanding. Claire inspected Roger's foot and was alarmed at the infection. Roger explained it was infected off and on. He only wanted answers. Brianna had not set Jamie and young Ian upon him to turn him away. It was Jamie's idea. Thank God, he said and opened them. I thought perhaps we had a terrible argument just before I left her. I thought that maybe that was why she hadn't told you about the hand fasting. That she decided she didn't want to be married to me. There was sweat on his forehead, either from the news or from my handling of his foot. He smiled a little painfully. Having me beaten to death or sold into slavery seemed a little trifle extreme, though, even for a woman with her temper. Jamie was slightly flushed. I did say I was sorry for it. I know. Roger looked at him for a minute, evidently making up his mind about something. He took a deep breath, then bent down and put my hand gently away from his foot. He straightened up and met Jamie's eyes dead on. I've something to tell you, what we fought over. Has she told you what brought her here, to find you? The death notice. Aye, she told us. You do not think I'd allow Claire to come with me otherwise. In Jamie's mind, a person can only die once, so it was safe to bring Claire with him on this dangerous trip. If the past couldn't be changed, Jamie assumed correctly. Roger explained that was precisely why he didn't tell Brianna about the notice. I found that death notice long before Brianna did. I thought, though, that it would be useless to try to change things, so I kept it from her. He looked from me to Jamie. So now you know. I didn't want her to come. I did everything I could to keep her away from you. I thought it was too dangerous, and I was afraid of losing her. He ended simply. To my surprise, Jamie was looking at Roger with sudden approval. You tried to keep her safe then, to protect her? Roger nodded, a certain relief lessening the tension in his shoulders. So you understand? Aye, I do. That's the first thing I've heard that gives me a good opinion of you, sir. Claire did not share that good opinion. She wholeheartedly disagreed with this idea of protection, just like Brianna had. Claire lambasted Roger for not telling Bree and trying to prevent her from going into the past. Jamie, though, would rather have not met her than for her to go through all she had since entering the 18th century. Roger had an epiphany. Brianna could not go back through the stones now. She was too far pregnant, or far too pregnant. Oh, the syntax of it all. Claire had tried to send her back early on, but Brianna wouldn't go without Roger. Jamie felt responsible for Brianna being stuck in his timeline. What happened to me? He repeated and glanced at Jamie. Jamie's shoulders tensed, and he set his jaw. Aye. It's my fault and no remedy for it. She's trapped here, and I can do nothing for her, save bring you back to her. And that, I realized, was why he had not wanted to tell Roger anything, for fear that when he realized Brianna was trapped in the past, Roger would refuse to come back with us. Following her into the past was one thing. Staying there forever with her was something else again. Neither was it guilt over Bonnet alone that had eaten Jamie up on our journey here. The Spartan boy with the fox gnawing at his vitals would have recognized a kindred soul on the spot, I thought, looking at him with exasperated tenderness. Roger gazed at him completely at a loss for words. So is it that simple? That he worried that Roger wouldn't come back because now Brianna was trapped, and it's his fault because he beat the crap out of Roger and then they couldn't leave when they found out she was pregnant? I still think it's more than that. That may be part of it, but I don't know if Claire is reading it properly. Though I think it's sweet how she finds it very tender, as that's why Jamie's been eating at himself. But is that why his attitude toward Roger is so crappy? Is it because he feels guilty or some other word over what happened. Suddenly, a group of Mohawks entered the longhouse. An older woman handed Roger the cradle board. The woman knew he was the son of a priest and wants him to baptize Father Alexandre and his lover's baby. Roger wasn't sure at first. Then Jamie reminded him any man could perform the duties of a priest in the time of need. Roger paled, but decided to perform the baptism in French. Écoutez les paroles de notre Seigneur Jésus Christ en obéissant à la parole de notre Seigneur Jésus et sûr de sa présence avec nous, nous baptisons ceux qu'il a appelés à être les siens, qui est votre Seigneur, votre Sauveur. Voulez-vous placer votre foi en lui? Promets-tu de dire à ces enfants la bonne nouvelle de l'Évangile et tout ce que le Christ commande, et par ta communion fraternelle de renforcer ses liens familiaux avec la famille de Dieu? Then Roger returned to Jamie and Claire. The baby passed between them. Roger finished sprinkling water on the baby's head and said, Je vous baptise, Alexandre, au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit. Amen. Ta-da! Now, I have no idea what that would sound like with the Scottish accent, tempered by Oxford, brought to the New World, speaking French. There you go. That is my version. Thank you very much. So he went through the whole baptism in French because the Mohawk knew their language, but they also were taught French by the priest. And the woman who handed Roger the cradle board is presumably the grandmother. So she was the mother of the woman who walked into the fire after the priest. The group of Christian Mohawk left the village, and Roger wondered if he was going to be the next to die. Claire shared what she learned from staying in Tawaktinyana's house the prior night. Some of the young men found the whiskey cache, I said. They brought it back to the village yesterday and started to drink. The women thought they didn't mean anything dishonest, that they thought the bargain was already made. But then some argument started among them just before they lit the fire to execute the priest. A fight broke out and some of the men ran into the crowd. And one thing led to another. I rubbed a hand hard over my face, trying to keep my thoughts clear enough to speak. A man was killed in the fighting. I glanced at Roger. They think you killed him. Did you? He shook his head, shoulders slumping with tiredness. I don't know. Probably. What will they do about it? Well, it took them a long time to decide, and it isn't settled yet. They've sent word to the main council, but the sachem hasn't made a decision yet. I took a deep breath. They won't kill you because the whiskey was taken and that was offered as the price of your life. But since they've decided not to kill us in revenge for their dead, what they usually do instead is to adopt an enemy into the tribe in replacement of the dead man. That shook Roger out of his numbness. Adopt me? They want to keep me? One of us, one of you. I don't suppose I'd be a suitable replacement since I'm not a man. I tried to smile but failed completely. All the muscles of my face had gone numb. Then it must be me, Jamie said quietly. Roger's head jerked up, startled. You've said yourself, if the past cannot be changed, then nothing will happen to me. Leave me, and as soon as it can be managed, I will escape and come home. He laid a hand on my arm before I could protest. You and Ian will take Mackenzie back to Brianna. He looked at Roger, his face inscrutable. After all, it's the two of you she needs. Roger started in at once to argue, but I butted in. May the Lord deliver me from stubborn Scotsmen, I said. I glared at the two of them. They haven't decided yet. That's only when the Council of Mother says, so there's no sense in arguing about it until we know for sure. And speaking of knowing things for sure, I said in hope of distracting them, where's Ian? Jamie stared at me. I don't know. he said, and I saw his throat ripple as he swallowed. But I hope to God he's safe in that girl's bed. Way to use some humor there, Fraser. So, Jamie, believing the past can't be changed, believes if he goes with them, he's not going to die. It doesn't mean he's going to be able to escape either. It's a pretty treacherous trip and challenge, but he is a better navigator of woods than Roger Mackenzie Wakefield, that's for sure. And he knows how to get out of sticky situations. Young Ian had not been seen since the chaos of the night before. It was the following afternoon before there was a visitor to the longhouse. It was young Ian. He was there to say goodbye to Jamie and Claire. His hair had been plucked into a mohawk style, his ear pierced, and his face tattooed. The adoption ceremony was to be in the evening. The naming ceremony is tonight, Ian said, trying not to look at us. They say that after that I will be the Indian, and I must not speak any tongue but the Kanyankahaka. I cannot speak again in English or the Gaelic. He smiled painfully. And I ken you didn't have much mohawk. Ian, you canna be doing this. I've done it, Uncle Jamie. Ian said softly. He looked at me then. Auntie, will you say to my mother that I will not forget her? My dad will know, I think. Oh, Ian! I hugged him hard and his arms went gently around me. You can leave in the morning, he said to Jamie. They will not prevent you. I let him go and he crossed the hut to where Roger stood looking stunned. Ian offered him a hand. I'm sorry for what we did to you, he said quietly. You'll take good care of my cousin and the bairn? Roger took his hand and shook it. He cleared his throat and found his voice. I will, he said, I promise. Then Ian turned to Jamie. No, Ian, he said. God, no, lad, let it be me. Ian smiled, though his eyes were full of tears. You said to me once that my life was not meant to be wasted. It won't be. I will not forget you either, Uncle Jamie. Oh. That crushes my heart. Wow. I've read that so many times, and it still gets me all choked up. The ceremony included his whiteness being scrubbed away with sand and given a new name, Wolf's Brother. Jamie surprised the Mohawk by placing his plaid over young Ian's shoulder. Are any of you crying? Imagine Jamie writing to Jenny about her son. Yep. I can't wait to see how this unfolds on screen. I know I'm blurring the line between the verses, but I'm trying to imagine how some of this is going to play out and the gravity of it. And this is so serious, and this is a pivotal moment for young Ian in his maturation, in his adulthood, where, at 14, he had to kill somebody, or he thinks he did. He lost his virginity. Then he was stolen by Galus Duncan's pirate crew. And then he was abused by Galus. And it took his, uncle and aunt months and months to track him in the West Indies. And then he's here working on the ridge with them after being in River Run. And he's getting older. It's been some time. And he's truly becoming a man, and he's making a decision to be a man. And there's already that spark between him and his woman that he calls Emily, and he becomes part of her family. That's a big deal. So he's embracing that because this is his new family. But could you imagine not being able to speak your own language? Again, you have lost your name, that you've been totally taken away and being adopted in. Now, this is something that culturally This was a way to replace someone who had been killed. They believe wrongfully killed, right? So they adopted him in. Well, a really very difficult part of Native Americans or the tribal people in the United States, when it was becoming the United States and became the United States, was that the people from these cultures, because they don't consider themselves all one group. They're by their tribe name generally, or they go by Native Americans or American Indians. It's very specific to the individual person and to the individual tribe that they belong to. It's not across the board. But many were taken out of their homes and put into schools where they got Americanized English names. They were only allowed to speak English. They were only allowed to worship a Christian God. And they lost their heritage. And they fit nowhere when they got out of these schools. They didn't really fit with white America or the rest of America, and they didn't fit with their tribal people anymore. They were sort of in a no man's land. And that's occurred until well into the 1960s. So it's interesting to me and very tragic that something that was a cultural norm to keep their number secure, right, and to keep strong, was something that was used in a colonial way against them in the years to come in order to obliterate themselves. And dear Ottertooth was trying to save them from that, right? They left the next morning after Jamie silently hugged and kissed Ian goodbye. The trio was quiet throughout the day and set up camp that evening. Roger spoke, asking Claire about the circle in the Indies. She was too tired to explain, so she simply said, yes, as in it existed. Then he went on to tell Claire there was another stone circle 8 days' travel from Fraser's Ridge. There would still not be enough time to get back to River Run, collect Brianna, and get back to the stone circle for them to go back to the 20th, though. Jamie brought up that Roger didn't have to stay. He could go back to his own time. Tempers and words flared. Roger looked at him startled. He began, then firmed his jaw and started over. I do. You don't think I'd leave her and my child? I opened my mouth and felt Jamie stiffen beside me in mourning. No, we have to tell him. Brianna will. Better he should know now. If it makes a difference to him, then it's better he knows before he sees her. Jamie's lips pressed tight together, but he nodded. Aye, tell him then. Tell me what? Roger's dark hair was loose, rising around his head in the evening wind. He looked more alive than he had since we had found him, alarmed and excited at once. I bit the bullet. It may not be your child, I said. His expression didn't change for a moment, then the words fell into place. He grabbed me by my arms so suddenly that I yelped with alarm. What do you mean? What happened? Jamie moved like a striking snake. He caught Roger a short, sharp blow under the chin that loosened his grip and sent him sprawling backward on the ground. She means that when you left my daughter to her own devices, she was raped. 2 days past the time you lay with her. So maybe the wean's yours, and maybe it's not. He glared down at Roger. So, do you mean to stand by her, or no? Roger shook his head, trying to clear it, and got slowly back to his feet. Raped? Who? Where? In Wilmington. A man named Stephen Bonnet. Bonnet? It was only too clear from Roger's expression that the name was familiar. He stared wildly from me to Jamie and back. Brianna was raped by Stephen Bonnet? So I said. Suddenly all the rage Jamie had been holding since our exit from the village broke loose. He seized Roger by the throat and slammed him into a tree trunk. And where were you when it was done, you coward? She was angry with you, and so you ran away and left her. If you thought you must go, why did you not see her safe into my keeping first? I grabbed Jamie's arm and yanked. Let go of him! He did and whirled away, breathing hard. Roger, shaken and almost as furious as Jamie, shook down his ruffled clothing. Roger fired back, showing the gemstone he stole from Bonnet, not knowing Bonnet stole it from Claire and Jamie, who had taken it from Galus. Roger explained what happened. I shipped with Stephen Bonnet from Scotland. Roger was growing a little calmer. He is I ken what he is. Jamie stirred, breaking his trance. But what he also may be is the father of my daughter's child. He gave Roger a long, cold look. So I'm asking you, Mackenzie, can you go back to her and live with her, knowing that it's likely Bonnet's child she bears? For if you cannot do it, then say so now, for I swear if you come to her and treat her badly, I will kill you without a second thought. For God's sake, I burst out. Give him a moment to think, Jamie. Can't you see that he hasn't had a chance even to take it in yet? Roger's fist closed tight over the jewel, then opened it. I could hear him breathing harsh and ragged. I don't know, he said. I don't know. Jamie stooped and picked up the stone where Roger had dropped it. He flung it hard between Roger's feet. Then go. Take yon cursed stone and find your wicked circle. Get you gone, for my daughter does not need a coward. Interesting on that. Emeralds are very brittle, so if it has been cut, it could have shattered if he threw it at Roger's feet. Just a side note. Jamie mounted his horse and told Claire to come with him. Roger told her to go and he would come if he could. Claire and Jamie rode away, leaving Roger with the gemstone in his hand and a decision to make. Young Ian made a huge sacrifice, but made it for love and obligation. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Jamie had great anger toward Roger and treated him badly. How could a man hearing such shocking news be able to know how he felt about it? I don't like the big deal that's made of a child not being of one's blood. Jamie adopted Fergus, Claudel, and loved O'Leary's daughters as his own. Both Claire and Roger had been adopted. And Frank had raised Brianna as his blood daughter. Roger had been through hell during the many months since Jamie had given him to the tribe. You would think Jamie, having been a captive, would certainly understand the difficulties Roger faced. He seemed to have little compassion for Roger and blamed him for using young Ian. Besides what we've already heard, from Claire's vantage point, what compelled Jamie to act in such a way? I think there's so much more to it. Is it just fatherly protectiveness? And Roger, he should not have left her alone. He was not thinking like an 18th century man. He was thinking like a 20th century man, where a woman could travel alone and generally be fine. And the fact that he didn't make sure she got to her parents safely, at least one of her parents or her aunt, is really wrong of him. But how do you know that? It's like Claire not being afraid of men still, right? It's their second trip back, and she still doesn't have the fear of men that an 18th century woman would. And so you have to transplant a 20th century historian into this time where history is leaping into life right in front of him, and he's trying to adjust. But it doesn't matter how big and strong Brianna is. Men are stronger. Chapter 62, 3/3 of a Ghost. River Run, April 1770. Lord John dropped the bomb on Brianna that Stephen Bonnet was captured. He sent the nearby servant to bed to keep listening ears away. He wanted to go to bed himself, but the information could not hold any longer. Bonnet had been caught in Cross Creek and charged with smuggling tea and brandy, but charges were added when his identity was discovered. Lord John searched Brianna's face for signs of swooning. She was steady, though pale. Bonnet was to hang the following week. Lord John was impressed by how much the baby had grown in 2 months since their engagement. The baby moved pressing out toward him, and he worried about the stress of knowing could cause her to go into preterm labor. His worry escalated, and he thought to get a servant. But Brianna merely said thank you. The calmness she expressed relieved Lord John to the state of her health. Brianna wants to see him. Lord John misunderstood, thinking she wanted to watch the execution. He protested. She only wanted to talk to him. John choked on his drink. She went on to tell him of her outrageous plan to see Bonnet and the utter scandal it would cause. Well, Brianna knows how to take a conversation from zero to red line in 1 moment. I don't think there's enough booze to keep Lord John from shock from Brianna's boldness. He asked her why she wanted to speak to Bonnet. She handed him a piece of paper written by her father. Daughter, I cannot say if I shall see you again. My fervent hope is that it shall be so, and that all may be mended between us. But that event must rest in the hand of God, and right now in the event that he may will otherwise. You asked me once whether it was right to kill in revenge of the great wrong done you. I tell you that you must not. For the sake of your soul, for the sake of your own life, you must find the grace of forgiveness. Freedom is hard won, but it is not the fruit of murder. Do not fear that he will escape vengeance. Such a man carries with him the seeds of his own destruction. If he does not die at my hand, it will be by another. But it must not be your hand that strikes him down. Hear me for the sake of the love I bear you. Your most affectionate and loving father, James Fraser. But that was scratched out, and below it was simply written, Da. That is quite a letter. He had tried to kill Blackjack Randall himself, but he didn't. He ended up making him impotent, perhaps? And he ended up killing him on the battlefield. We presume, we were not sure. Myrta could have killed him. Sometime we'll find out, right? Because Jamie doesn't remember Culloden. Probably purposely, but he doesn't remember what happened. So he's charging her with forgiveness and not murdering Bonnet by her own hand. Bottom line, Brianna wanted to be free whether or not Roger returned. Forgiveness was at the heart of her need to see him. You are sure you must see Bonnet? She gave him another one of those long blue looks. I have to find a way to forgive him, Daw says. I've been trying ever since they left, but I can't do it. Maybe if I see him, I can. I have to try. All right. He let his breath out in a long sigh, shoulders slumping in capitulation. A small light, relieved, showed in her eyes, and he tried to smile back. You'll do it? Yes, God knows how, but I'll do it. Before retiring to bed, he asked if he could feel the baby move. He was delighted to feel the baby press against his hand. I love how their relationship has grown and that it is really a safe place. They can be brutally honest with each other in a way that John can't always be with Jamie totally, right? And Brianna hasn't found a way to be that honest with her father. And yes, as I think Gina pointed out, that it's a way for John to keep part of the family. Like these little threads keep dragging him back into being part of the Fraser household in some capacity. Lord John took Brianna to the garrison. Bonnet was being held in the basement of the warehouse. The soldier on duty, Hodgepile, was bribed to allow them in. The name was known to Brianna from Ronnie Sinclair's description when he was nosing around asking about whiskey and such. They gained entrance. Hodgepile was startled, seeing Brianna. They passed the contents of the warehouse, leaving Brianna with a sense of confinement. Hodgepile instructed her to be careful with the lantern. Fire would be especially dangerous. Once down in the basement, the dampness took over. She was determined not to panic. Lord John encouraged her. She entered the room on her own. Bonnet was chained to her relief. Brianna spoke. "Do you know who I am?" It was a tiny cell, low-ceilinged, with no echo. Her voice sounded small, but clear. He cocked his head over to one side, considering. His eyes traveled slowly over her. "I don't think you're after telling me your name, sweetheart." "Don't call me that!" The spurt of rage took her by surprise, and she choked it back, clenching her fists behind her. If she had come here to administer forgiveness, it wasn't a good start. He shrugged, good-natured but cool. "As you will." "No, I don't know who you are. I'll know your face and a few other things." His teeth gleamed briefly in the blonde stubble of his beard. "But not your name. I suppose you'll mean to tell me, though." "You do recognize me?" He drew in air and blew it out through his pursed lips, looking her over carefully. He was a good bit worse for wear, but it hadn't impaired his assurance. "Oh, indeed I do." He seemed amused, and she wanted to cross the room and slap him hard. Instead, she took a deep breath. That was a mistake. She could smell him. Brianna vomited and then gathered herself. She told him her name. "My name is Brianna Fraser." He nodded, repeating it. "Brianna Fraser? A lovely name, sure." He smiled briefly, lips together. "And?" "My parents are James and Claire Fraser. They saved your life, and you robbed them." "Yes." He said it with complete matter-of-factness, and she stared at him. He stared back. His manner almost made her laugh. He told her the jewels had been stolen after he sold one to buy a ship. She wondered if Roger stole the two. The timing fit, she thought. He reminded her she got the ring back. "I paid for it!" One hand went unthinking to her belly, gone round and tight as a basketball under her cloak. His gaze stayed on her face, mildly curious. "Have you business still to do then, darling?" She took a deep breath, through her mouth this time. "They told me you're going to hang." "They told me the same thing." He shifted again on the hard wooden bench. He stretched his head to one side to ease the muscles of his neck and peered up sidelong at her. "You not have come from pity, though, I shouldna think." "No. To be honest, I'll rest a lot easier once you're dead." She wanted nothing from him, but had come to give him something. She told him the baby was his. What in the hell caused her to think this was a good idea, and there was only a chance the baby was his anyway? She hoped the knowledge would give him ease, knowing he left something behind after he died. Enter Sergeant Murchison. He threatened her. Brianna reacted and swung the lantern at his head. Stephen Bonnet grabbed her before she could hit him again. He was not chained, after all. It also looked like Murchison had killed Lord John, who was sprawled on the floor in the hall. Murchison again threatened to shoot Brianna, but the cramped quarters made it impossible. The sergeant grunted with irritation, reversed the gun, and raised it high to club her with the butt. Her hand was clenched around the barrel before she knew she had reached for it. Everything seemed to be moving very slowly. Murchison and Bonnet both standing frozen. She herself felt quite detached, as though she stood to one side, watching. She plucked the musket from Murchison's grip, as though it were a broom straw, swung it high, and smashed it down. The jolt of it vibrated up her arms, into her body, her whole body charged as though someone had thrown a switch and sent a white-hot current pulsing through her. She saw so clearly the man's face hanging drop-jawed in the air before her, eyes passing from astonishment, through horror, to the dullness of unconsciousness, so slowly that she saw the change. Had time to see the vivid colors in his face, a plum lip caught on a yellow tooth, half lifted in a sneer, slow tiny blossoms of brilliant red unfolding in a graceful curve around his temple, Japanese waterflowers blooming on a field of fresh bruised blue. She was entirely calm, no more than a conduit for the ancient savagery that men called motherhood, who mistake it tenderness for weakness. She saw her own hands, knuckles stark and tendons etched, felt the surge of power up her legs and back, through wrists and arms and shoulders, swung again so slowly. It seemed so slowly, and yet the man was still falling, had not quite reached the floor when the gun butt struck again. Mama Bear is in the house, for sure. She was not going to let anything happen to her and her baby. What do you think about Bonnet not being chained? In the dimness of her mind, she heard her name. Bonnet was shouting at her to stop. The building was going to blow, and they had to get out. She blocked the door until he explained everything. She refused to let him leave Murchison to die, so he slit his throat to be done with it. Brianna was contracting. Braxton Hicks, though, not contractions that cause labor. She, of course, did not know this fact. Bonnet ran out, and she stopped to check Lord John for a pulse. She found one weak and irregular. She calculated the risk of being in the basement if the upstairs caught fire and convinced herself it was safe, while she tried to puzzle out how to save Lord John. She was about to administer first aid to Lord John when Bonnet returned yelling for her to run. She believed it was safe and told him to go away. Safe? Woman, you're an idiot. Did you not hear? I heard, but you're wrong. It's not going to explode, and if it did, it would still be safe down here. The hell it is. Sweet bleeding Jesus. Even if the cellar doesn't go, what happens when the fire burns through the floor? It can't. It's brick. She jerked her chin upward, not taking her eyes off of him. Back here 'tis. Up front, by the river, it's wood, like the wharf. It'll burn through, then collapse. And what happens back here then? Eh? Do you no good for the ceiling to hold when the smoke comes rolling back to smother you? She felt a wave of sickness roll up from her depths. It's open? The cellar isn't sealed? The other end of the corridor is open? Knowing, even as she spoke, that of course it was, he had run that way, heading for the river, not for the stairs. Stephen Bonnet has some sort of interesting ethics and morals, doesn't he? Like, why would he even care if she came with him? The things that he does, he's such a mercenary, that man. She agreed to leave, but Bonnet had to carry Lord John to safety. He picked up Lord John, and she followed as quickly as she could. Can you imagine being 7 months pregnant and running for your life from a building about to blow up? After confronting your rapist and thinking, like, your new bestie is dead on the floor? At least, he must have a terrible concussion, is my guess. They made it out of the building to the wharf. The building was burning brightly. Bonnet asked her to go with him to his ship. She declined. He asked her if it was true that the baby was his while peering into her face. Believing her, he reached into his mouth and pulled a gem from his cheek. He put it in her hand to help pay for the baby's upkeep. He left, and she pondered shooting him as he ran off. But she heard Jamie's voice in her head and put the gun down. That was a powerful letter that he left her, that the vengeance should not be hers. She opened her hand and found the black diamond staring back at her. Wow. What was Brianna thinking? The woman has her mother's penchant for rashness and not caring whether she created a scandal. Each read, I have a difficult time figuring out why she would tell Bonnet the baby was unequivocally his. How did that propel her forgiving him? What will happen now that he has escaped and believed he is the baby's father? For all her engineer brain thinking, she certainly does not stop to think about the what-ifs and how they might impact the future. I'm still trying to put all that together. It doesn't make much sense to me, so maybe you can tell me. So let's talk about Braxton Hicks contractions. They're considered practice contractions that do not create cervical change. It's basically the uterus making a muscle. So imagine that 2 or 3-year-old that comes up to you and shows them their strong biceps, right? And they're like, look, and they do it right in front of you like a bodybuilder. Or when you smile, that's a contraction of muscles. So Braxton Hicks are non-productive practice contractions. They start as early as 8 to 9 weeks in pregnancy. We don't feel them. Thank goodness. That would be horrendous to feel them that early. Some women start feeling them as early as 4 months, around 16 weeks, and some don't feel them at all, but they're always happening. And what she was experiencing often can come from stress, dehydration. She had a massive adrenaline hit, and her whole body, or her whole belly rather, tightened like a basketball. It does make it very difficult to breathe for some women because the diaphragm is already squished, the lungs are squished, everything is squished and moved aside because of that greatly growing baby inside the uterus, right? The uterus starts out the size of about a pear, an upside down pear, and then you get what you get at the end. So it's remarkable. So that squeezing of the uterus can be painful, but normally it's pressure, it's intensity, and for a lot of women, they just can't breathe through them because it takes their breath away when it happens, but they're non-productive. Contractions that would be worrisome for Brianna would be the low, radiating contractions starting in the pubic bone that kind of go up and around toward her back, or she would feel these waves rhythmically in her lower abdominal area, pubic area, or in her back. Some women every once in a while feel them down their legs, but they're wave-like, they're rhythmic, they start short and sharp, and they get longer, stronger, and closer together. That's what we'd be worried about, or if her water broke, or if she was seeing a lot of blood-tinged mucus, or that sort of thing. But the Braxton Hicks generally have to go away before lasting labor can start. I've seen a woman have Braxton Hicks during labor, and we had to get those to stop so her productive contractions could do their job, and that poor mama had the worst abdominal muscle soreness the next day. It was terrible. We got it to work, but it's no fun whatsoever. But most of the time, those tight basketball-type contractions will just go away. And often, resting or changing activity, drinking lots of water, etc., will make a difference. And just, if you're listening and you're pregnant, magnesium and calcium can mellow them out. Or red raspberry leaf tea. If you're the one person that it makes you have more Braxton Hicks, then don't drink it. But some women, it's just the size of the belly, the uterus getting pulled on. They're going to have them when they have activity or they're standing for a long time. But Brianna doesn't know about those. Not like she's had a whole lot of childbirth or pregnancy education, right? Health class that her mom did is not adequate to go through the norms of pregnancy. And Claire's been gone and couldn't explain how some of this stuff works. And though Claire is very good at this, her field of focus was not pregnancy and childbirth. It was surgery. So though she has great knowledge, this is not her specialty either. And she may not have thought to tell Brianna certain things. Okay. And when it comes to who's the father of this baby, so I know I talked about this a bit before, but in order for coitus interruptus, or pull and pray as I like to call it, to work in between each encounter, the penis needs to be washed off, rinsed off, to get any wayward sperm that are left behind on the head of the penis or on the glands to be rinsed away. If he misfired and was not totally off of her or not totally just like on her belly, if he was anywhere near her, like thigh area, anywhere near her crotch whatsoever, when he ejaculated, man, biological imperative will find a way. So they had how many encounters in that 12, 14-hour period, 12-hour period, whatever it was, 8-hour period? I'd have to go back and look at the exact timing. But if they had like 4 or 5 encounters and he didn't wash himself in between, like wiping yourself off with a shirt is like not adequate. There's still going to be semen left behind. Ejaculate left behind, right? That's what got her pregnant. They didn't get up and go wash. So he had a lot of access to her vagina with his unwashed, multi-time ejaculating penis. So, there you have it. So I don't know why in her head this baby could not possibly be Roger's. Maybe it's her way of being self-protective, because if she thinks it's Roger's and he doesn't want to stay, it's going to hurt her more. And if she thinks it's Bonnet's, then she can justify Roger leaving or not wanting her. I don't know. Some of this stuff would just be fixed if they would communicate, right? If she had just told her parents they were handfasted and not thinking she was doing the right thing and being protective of Roger by not telling them. I don't know, isn't that the pot calling the kettle black? Roger was trying to protect her by not telling her about that notice. Well, she was trying to protect Roger, maybe his honor or something, and his ability to leave without her, if she didn't tell her parents and giving him an escape route, right? Did that protect Roger? No. It got him beaten near to death and sold into slavery. And with a very angry father-in-law. Months and months, 4 or 5 months. He hasn't seen her since that night. Months and months and months have been wasted. All this tragedy, right? She could have waited and told her mother that she found the ring. I mean, it's very complicated. If they just communicated better, you know. So it's interesting to me that she will communicate with Lord John plainly, effectively. Maybe it's because he's not like blood. I don't know. But he is sort of blood because he's her half-brother's stepdad. But she doesn't know that yet, does she? Anyway. So please be frank and tell the truth. Be open, tell the truth. Don't keep things to yourself thinking you're protecting people because, again, the road to hell is paved with good intentions all the way around. This is a hellish road that's been paved. Anyhow. So the other thing to look at here is Roger twice standing in for the role of a priest. He did that with Father Alexandre, and he did that with the baptism of the baby. Now, he is the son of a pastor. So when you think of that, you know, we have to kind of look at what that means for the future, right? And what that could possibly be foreshadowing. So hold that little nugget, right? Hold that little nugget. And now that we have the black diamond, Roger has the emerald, Claire has the opal. And we've got some stones, for sure. They could travel. And with that stone circle in North Carolina, that's likely where Ottertooth came through, right? So that has some significance that we haven't really delved into fully yet. We will get there, but we are not there yet. So hold on to that stone circle being 8 days from Fraser's Ridge as well. Okay, and so hand fasting, I'm trying to think of all the little threads that are sitting here. Hand fasting is a year and 1 day. So it is now, May? Or is it still April? April. So they have until September, early September, to decide what they're doing. Now, Brianna has all these notions in her head, right? And she doesn't want a marriage of obligation. But I think love comes with obligation. You can have obligation without love. You can have it with all sorts of other tenderness and kindness and things. But I think in order for love to be more than just a feeling, obligation is part of that. Because you don't stay in love with that romantic butterfly thing all the time. So the obligation action of love is what keeps us where we are and keeps us working at it and keeps that romantic love alive. And it gives it foundation and gives it grit, right? Oh, and I posted on the Facebook page and group. I think I posted it in both. And I posted on my Facebook timeline under Desiree Andrews. A really interesting podcast that Kelly Mills had posted to me. Hoping I have that right. Because I didn't just go back look on my Facebook page. About a podcast that talked about why is it harder basically to stay married now. It's fantastic listening, and it really does cover what we talked about in a few podcasts ago about is it harder to be married now when we don't have contracts and we don't have all the different kinds of marriage and we have different expectations. Yeah, it absolutely is. And the guy became my favorite, the researcher, when he talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I was like, oh, he's totally my people. Because we have an expectation in our kind of westernized first world views that not only should marriage be for companionship, safety, protection, childbearing, whatever, all those things, right? Shelter, the basics, which is, basic human needs. That now marriage is supposed to fulfill, you're my best friend, you're my lover, you're my everything, right? And then it has moved forward even from there into you're helping me self-actualize myself. It's an incredible podcast. I will repost it and I will post a link to it in the show notes because really it's fantastic listening and explains how much we've changed so rapidly in our views toward marriage, even in, 50 years, 70 years. It was very quick change. And it's interesting. I think we need to be able to kind of adopt the village approach to our marriage. I don't mean multiple partners unless that's your thing. But I mean in the sense of we need to have our friends. We need to have our hobbies. We need to have other places that we also get affirmed and we can self-actualize. And we can't expect our partners to be everything to us. Where it used to be, lots of people would tend to those different parts of you and you to theirs, that now we just have this idea, this version that it can be everything and that we can't expect everything from our partners. Like, there's certain things I don't expect from my husband at all, not because I don't think he's capable, because that's just not what he does. I'm fine. I have girlfriends. And that's what my outlet's for. Like, he doesn't like doing certain things, so I don't expect him to do everything with me. I have girlfriends for that. I have people who have common interests with me. So that's what I do. Anyway, it's fascinating, and I will post it because you'll be amazed at how just great it is. And it really is eye-opening because we have to approach historical things, historical cultures, other times through their social mores, their purview, their religious beliefs, how they view men and women and genders and roles, why they did things how they did. But we can't do it through being 21st century people. We can never apply our labels because it wouldn't work. And it's confusing and doesn't make sense. And it causes a lot of uproar. But I imagine in 200 years, people are going to be looking back at us and thinking we were freaking mad when it comes to a lot of things that we did. They're going to think we're crazy. And they're not going to understand it all based on what they're doing culturally at that time period. We are going to become somebody's history. Isn't that weird? As a midwife, I'm very aware of that because every family that I attend, I become part of the fabric of their life in a way that they don't become part of mine. I remember every single one, every single baby, every family, every birth. I do. I don't know how, but I do. It's all there. They all impact me and they all become part of me. But I become part of their family lineage. I'm the person who helped bring their baby in the world, who caught their baby, who sometimes, yes, had to deliver the baby, because sometimes it takes all of us to get a baby out. But I become part of their line in a way that is just awe-inspiring to me. I am part of their family history. So when somebody looks up, oh, where is my great aunt so-and-so born? And they're going to look and say, oh, she was born at home with a midwife named Desiree. I mean, that's insane. That somebody down the line is going to be looking at their relatives and their families, and my name is going to be part of that. That's huge. It's a big responsibility. We are someone's history. So that's why I'm always hammering on the fact that we have to extricate our sensibilities. And that's what the characters are having to do. Roger's had to shed his 20th century persona. He has to live the history that he studied. And it's creating a whole different man. His foundation might be the same, but he is not the same man who went back. And same with Brianna, who was a young woman finding her way, growing into adulthood on her own. After her mother left, her dad died, she had to find some separation from Roger. She changed her major to engineering, graduated, sold the house. Like, she had to become completely herself, become a freestanding adult. And then now that is being redefined in this other time period because she can't stay that same person and survive or thrive there. She has to push some of that aside and take on what's the norms for that time. Even Claire. Claire is so adaptable. And I think that's because of her upbringing with an anthropologist, archaeologist, uncle that she was raised with and traveled around the world. And she was able to be part of other cultures and just live in it. And so she has a sense of ease of moving in and out. But even still, she never lets go of her, I'm equal to you and I am not scared of you. She never lets go of, I am going to do this. That 20th century vibe of hers of, And it gets her into trouble all the time. And I also posted an article by an anthropologist that is amazing. I mean, it's probably one of the best articles on why Claire is how she is and the draw to Outlander and us feeling like we're being there because Diana writes like we're part of the story. and they become ours and we become theirs. But she was writing about Claire's abilities are connected to her upbringing with an archaeologist, because they have to be able to understand culture and to work within it and to adapt. And so she has this sense of adaptation, but she's never lost that thing in her, that spark, that I can. But she had that when she was 5, 6, 7, 8, at birth. And when she defied her uncle and said, I'm not going to that boarding school, I'm going with you. Like, she always had it. That's her. But coming from the 20th century versus the 18th century, in her, it looks like I can do whatever I put my mind to. You can't stop me, and I'm not afraid of you. Even if I am afraid, I'm still doing it. And I love how she pointed out that the reason Jamie is so amazing for her as a husband and such a good partner is he's not protecting her, in air quotes. He's protecting her right to be who she is, even though it bothers him sometimes, and even though he wishes she'd chill out a little bit. He will, with his body, with his life, defend her right to be who she is, how she is, regardless of where she is. So, it's beautiful. I will post that as well in the show notes and on the page again, because it's the greatest article. I'm so glad to have read it this week. Anyway, I've yammered and yammered at you. I do have an email from Meredith this week. Thanks, Meredith. I love you popping up all the time. She said, Dear Desiree, I still don't like Jamie's bullying, although it's understandable after Ian has decided to exchange himself for Roger. I think also that Jamie doesn't want to really believe in Roger's innocence. Yes, he knows that Roger wasn't Brianna's rapist, but he spent months hating him, and it's hard for him to accept that her rapist is still out there. I do also believe that he keeps challenging Roger because he knows how hard it's going to be for him if he stays. If he can't face an intimidating father-in-law, what chance does Roger have in surviving the hostile wilderness in which they live? All I can say is that I hope that things are somewhat better between them in the show. Sincerely, Meredith of Everett, Washington. Thank you, Meredith. That is a good point. Somebody else made that point too, that it's Jamie's way of putting fire to Roger. Because when you go through fire, you come out hardened and stronger, right? And so you might be right. That's a really good point that I didn't think of by myself, because I was just mad at Jamie for being a jerk. And so is it that deep? Is it so deep that he's pushing Roger to be a better him, to forge Roger into this 18th century? I mean, he tells him twice that, Brianna doesn't need a coward. How in the hell is Roger a coward on any level? So is it him simply pushing him in his own way to make him stronger and to be able to handle it? You could be right. That's a really good point. So the rest of you, please, I love feedback. Please give me more feedback. You can leave it on the Facebook page, on the group where I post the link to the show notes and podcast. You can email me at contact@adramofOutlander.com. You can call 719-425-9444 and leave a voicemail message. You can tweet me at Dram of Outlander. And the other place that you can find a Dram of Outlander is on Instagram at Dram of Outlander as well. There's no A in front for space purposes. And please come on to Facebook and join the group. The A Dram of Outlander community is thriving. It's really active and fun to be part of. Y'all are really smart and interesting and ask good questions. And I love seeing your conversations. And again, Jan and Patricia are amazing administrators helping me. But you have to ask to join it. You have to answer 3 little questions so I know that you're a real person, that you really like Outlander, and that you're not some troll just trying to come and sell us stuff. The website, of course, is adramofoutlander.com. And another way that you can help the podcast, besides sharing it and coming on to the A Dram of Outlander group or page or interacting on Twitter, and the hashtag on Twitter is ADOO, A Dram of Outlander, I know, super original, is to give me reviews. Spotify, Apple Podcasts through iTunes. 5-star reviews get people to find me. And Apple Podcast is still the place. It's the kind of very sacred place of podcasts. So if you can go into Apple Podcasts through iTunes and give me a 5-star rating, I appreciate you greatly. Spotify is catching up. Google Play is catching up. Go there. Also review it. It will just take a couple of minutes. You can just give the stars without even leaving an explanation. But people like to read explanations, but it will help them find me. I know what I do is different than what the other podcasts do. I'm by myself. I like to really look at the stories and where they're going and how they apply to themselves. And I love really getting down to the nitty-gritty with these characters and what the storylines are. Next week, we're doing chapters 63 through 65. We're almost done. And then we're going to do a space between, which is about Michael and Joni. And we see some other familiar faces. That will be right on the heels of finishing Drums of Autumn. And we're set, if we have the November 4th premiere date, like we believe it is, for the TV show, then the Fiery Cross read-along will start the first Sunday in February 2019. That's already in the works. Woohoo! So please, questions, comments, thoughts, tell me where I'm wrong. I love that. Contact at adramofoutlander.com or 719-425-9444. And lastly, how you can support the podcast is financially. A one-time offering, you can leave me a message and I can tell you how, or you can go to patreon.com/adramofoutlander or Venmo to my Desiree Andrews. So every dollar counts. I thank you for listening. Oh, I hope that you love the new intro and outro music. I found it on a Creative Commons site, and it's amazing, and I think it's beautiful and eerie and speaks perfectly to where we are with our Outlander experience. And until next time, Slán je va.